We are lost in the endless and titanic halls of windowless metal. Some of the things are pursuing us are so large that to them even these halls are cramped, and the miters of the crawling sphinxes scrape flakes of debris from the expanse of black plate above. I say we are aboard a ship. The other men resurrected from the archive disagree. Some think we are in hell, or in a fairy mound, or suffering the hallucinations imposed by the thinking machines of futuristic science. All of us, the man from the latest period of humanity was from of all of us, the man from the latest period of humanity was from AD 29 million, some 29 million years after my death. He came from an age long after the sun had died, a terror-haunted world of eternal darkness. His home was the titanic fortress called the Last Redoubt, a structure hulled against the infinite cold of a sunless sky, nursing its life on the few embers of dying geothermal and geomagnetic heat. His name is Edmos of Utter Tower. Edmos thinks this vessel is a redoubt like his, one long ago captured by the enemy, and that we are all buried far underground. This is the final review of Awake in the Nightland, uh, by John C. Wright. It's one of my favorite books. This story is called The Last of All Suns. In it, Captain Powell awakes with a million other men of all times and planets that man has ever touched. They, led by Nimrod, overthrow overthrow the cloning overseers and escape out into the windowless halls of dull gray metal. They cannot escape, and one by one they fall to the monsters that roam the halls. Giants, strange trees that move of their own accord, slug monsters, and worse things besides, all haunt their steps. Eventually, only 8 men remain. A Neanderthal, a hunter from the 14th BC millennia. 14th millennia BC, excuse me. A king of Atlantis, Enoch, Captain Powell, a test tube baby of the future, and a scientist from the space colonies in 335,000 AD, and a man of the last redoubt who I just described. They hide away from their pursuers and find a porthole to see the last of all suns, a black hole consuming all remaining matter in the universe. Eventually, only the Neanderthal and Powell remain. Each of the people released was a reincarnation of Powell, excepting only the immortal Neanderthal. It is revealed that those two were kept alive long enough to kick-start the next universe by the dread powers of the night. Powell dives into his memories to find some way to fight the dread powers, but it is useless. Instead, he finds the good power behind the door of the last house, the House of Silence, and he lets those good powers both out into the world and into his heart, and the dread powers are defeated. The two themes here are romantic love and the love of God. Now, I've heard some people say that they don't like how it's portrayed in here, but I disagree with that statement. I think it is done quite well. I'm not gonna. It satisfied me. I'll just say, I was not. I disagree with those who criticize the love plots in this story. I'm more interested in the fact that in the brutal world of the Nightlands, nearly all the characters have lost their true loves to tragedy and malice. Even the Neanderthal seeks for the one he lost. Edmos of Uttermost Tower yearns for his loved one at the end of time, where the last child is supposed to reunite all lovers. Or is it the good powers? It's a little bit confusing. He Sings Death entered the underworld as a prototype Orpheus to find his lover, but found her monstrous in the end. The king of Atlantis married a witch who redeemed herself, but died of a plague. The blue man cloned his own flesh and gene changed it from a mate to a mate, who died, though I can't remember how. Even Abraxander of the Threshold, the man from the 35th millennium, I assume, had somebody. The world is explicitly made better by searching for that love. Then it is made worse, almost, by losing it. This is just a surface reading. Those characters are dramatically changed by the loss of their loved one, where before they had not experienced that flavor of despair, or pain, or misery. But that doesn't mean at all that the pursuit shouldn't be made. Yeah, okay, good. Sorry. I thought my microphone had stopped working for a second. All right, I'm going back into it. What's more, loneliness doesn't have the good memories and the grounding that the past would do to hearten the depressive. It doesn't have that savor of something that could have been, but isn't anymore. The experience of love, true love, I have never seen fail to brighten the lives and give hope of those who participate in it, whether romantically or between man and God. Much of the Bible conflates biblical love with romantic love. Though John C. Wright was an atheist at this time, his muse understood that idea very well. It is through romantic love that a connection is made, through his wife, between Powell and the good powers. The love flows into him, and the wife is like some diverting prism and out against the good powers, which are helpless before it. The dread powers could never copy or imitate love. Not really. They only had hate and hunger to guide them. They devoured their underlings, who had devoured their own underlings, and so on and so forth until you get those base creatures that have been the antagonists for much of the series so far. There was no way for them to grow except that they corrupt more and more, and once they had finished corrupting this universe, they must reach the next one. And they wanted to do it for cruelty's sake. No other reason. I spend the least time describing the plot of this short story, not because of spoilers, but because it is the least important part of the story. The whole conversations are just window dressing, discussing the ideas that are paid off when when the door in the last house is open and Powell accepts the good powers into his heart. These men, are considering the seed of the next one as much as they're seeing the destruction of the old one. And it is in this way that Powell discovers the solution to the threat of the dread powers. These cyclopean things who sit beyond the mountains which are infinitely away and observe man fumbling around in the darkness. Observe Powell panicking and fighting against some minions they held in reserve to bring him down at the last minute. The themes of romantic love, they are evil things. The themes of romantic love and the love of God are mixed in so well as to be the perfect capstone of all 4 short stories. The themes of the first, of childish romantic love especially, are matured, while not being rebuked, as one might say. The themes hinted at throughout, that there are good powers that love us, good power, are unleashed fully from the converted house of silence, which is purified by love. It is fundamentally a Christian story. It is a story of hope, and it ends with the dread powers defeated and driven away by the light. That doesn't mean that they are destroyed themselves. No, they remain. but it means that they cannot move, they cannot be like they once were. Sin is sin, and mankind is imperfect. And while mankind is imperfect, those dread powers will remain. But the love of Christ shutters them, binds them with chains, so that they cannot be the threat that they would love to be. The last thing I want to talk about is that theme of agape, that self-sacrificial love, the love that drove Christ to the cross for us, so that we would be sinners no more and bound to hell, but rather new creatures through his blood and the rejection of the sin that mires us so deeply in pain, misery, and torment. Not a single hero of the books refuses the call with success. Telemachus risks his life to find Pericles, Antigone for Polynices. Both Aeneas and Serapis risk their lives and souls for each other. Only Powell doesn't have the same strong theme of it compared to the rest, but that's because it is subtle. He was willing to leave the door to the next universe closed, even though it might mean he will never reunite with his true love. Meanwhile, the Neanderthal, the only other man still living, Kitamil, who is willing to make the deal to get back his wife Magigi, even if it proves to be a false promise in the end. And in the original Nightland by William Hope Hodgson, the book that all this is inspired by, Andros risks everything for Murdath and throws himself into the Nightlands, prepared and willing to do what it takes to bring her back. When they are together again, they risk everything for each other. They defy the humped men and their most powerful enemies, and even death. And this, of course, is the greatest theme of the best Nightlands mythos. Men go out into the Nightlands to wrest some advantage from the sieging hordes, or to save their brother-in-arms from their clutches, or investigate some mystery that the dread powers have ringed their last redoubt about with. For love. They might not love every member of the redoubt, but every one of the millions turns their attention to the view tables when someone goes out. They follow them in their troubles day to day. They send warnings and cheer them on when they can. They are willing to sacrifice their comfort and time for them. Humans, being psychic after a time, can feel it, can feel the love, the choices, the desires of others, and it can strengthen them. Even in our own world, have you not felt the difference between a happy household and the unhappy one, the funeral home or the church? The strength to defeat the dread powers lies not in some powerful weapon or unbreakable shield that we can make, but in the strength of the heart to resist the dark calls, and the good power that empowers us to do what's necessary and to succeed at the good things that we would do. It is a beacon to each adventurous soul who goes out. Though the powers do all in their ability to destroy, it is love that is the final master word, determining human from monster. This is the last of the videos describing Awake in the Nightland for now. I'll be returning to the series later in my career to talk about the two parts of the Nightlands, House on the Borderlands, and other works of William Hope Hodgson. My next big series will be Galaxy's Edge. I happen to own all of it. Be sure to pick up Awake in the Nightland. There's a link in the bottom. And like, comment, and subscribe if you want to know something in particular, or me to cover some part of the lore that you might want to hear more about. I'm always happy to talk about it. And eventually I'll also do a story or two that does it quite badly. And I'll explain why. Because the good sometimes does have to be contrasted with the bad to bring out that savor. All right. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening.